We are now in work session. Today is Monday, February 8. Welcome, Susan Favati of BFJ Planning. Susan and her team have been working with us on the question of whether a floor area ratio ought to be added to our zoning code in some residential districts. They provided us with a memo on that subject. That's an attachment in your agenda, which I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at. Eric, Noreen, and Robert and I had a chat with Susan last week and encouraged her to come tonight to see what everyone else's thoughts were, because it certainly felt to me as though we were kind of rounding second base, headed for third for sure. So you want to just give a quick update, Susan?
Sure, and I'm not going to go through the memo in detail because there's a lot of numbers, and I'm hoping that
and everybody has it, so
at least looked at it. But we were able to get a lot of good data from Westchester County. We essentially calculated an existing FAR for all of the homes in Pleasantville based on the building footprint and some assumptions about height. It's probably not 100% perfect, but it's we think it's a good cross section. We feel confident in that data. And then we also supplemented that with more recent data from Robert Hughes on some of the newer homes in Pleasantville. So within the last 5 years or so. So making sure that we've captured really everything up to date. And so based on that, we were able to come up with, all those existing FARs. We looked at the highs and lows. We sort of categorized them by lot size and created a median. And I think our feeling, and we talked about this last week with the mayor and the others from the village, that the medians are actually a really good place to start. And we compared those with some of your peer communities. Interestingly, they kind of line up closest with the town of Amerenik, which I wouldn't have necessarily thought. But I think in some areas they have very similar building types in terms of their homes to Pleasantville. So the good news, I think, is that several of your peer communities have already done this, done the work. We can see that it works. We can use a lot of their regulations. We've got the medians now. So we've really got what we need to build off of to actually start drafting the regulations. The main things we talked about last week are, additional considerations, particularly with regard to basements and attics. And I guess before I go into that, I just want to ask if there's any general questions on the memo.
So I do.
That we did.
I do. I had a hard time figuring out the size of a house. So like on a small lot, not a big lot, a big lot is one thing, you can put more house on it, but a small lot, like a 4,000 square foot lot or a 5,000 square foot lot, right? Not that big. And the number came out like 4.2 or something like that, like, what does that mean? I don't know where that, I didn't read the whole memo. It was just too long. There's that. And then the other thing is, what's the issue with the basement and the third floor, which is the attic? But first, let's start with what size house are we talking about?
Well, let's see, I'm just flipping through the memo. So when you look at, we didn't actually do it a lot by lot size and looking at the actual, I have it somewhere in a spreadsheet, Joe, but in the R1 district, which you tend to have a little bit smaller lots than some of the others, some of those, basically the average is about 1,800 square feet when you include new construction. In the RR district, slightly larger lot sizes, it's actually about the same. It's about 1,800 square feet. It's in those largest lots, the triple R zone, where you see the biggest new homes. Right now, the average is almost 1,900 square feet, but some of the newer constructed homes that we've seen were, approaching 3,000 or even more than 3,000 square feet. So I guess it sounds like you're most concerned perhaps in the smallest lot zones, and in the
so like, for example, the house across the field from my house and where I live, that's a huge house, but if and I don't know what size the lot is. The lot might not be 5,000. It might be 6,000 or something like that. But it's not that big of a lot, and they're building a big house. I'm trying to get my head around what size house by stories. 1, 2 stories. And then the second question is, of course, basement and the attic, what the issues are there. So
Right. Okay. Well, your zoning currently allows 2.5 stories. I think it's 30 feet though, if I recall correctly. Robert, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's across the board. On some of those smallest lot areas, so 5,000 square feet or lower, our finding is that most of them actually don't conform to existing zoning, which isn't a terrible surprise. A lot of them probably predate the zoning regulations. So they may not meet setbacks. They probably don't meet the building coverage. I think the building coverage is really going to be what controls on those smaller lots. So our thinking actually is perhaps we don't even apply the FAR restrictions to those smallest areas because they're already controlled by other factors like building coverage and setbacks. Many of them already don't conform now. You're just adding essentially another variance that they'd be required to get. It's really on those larger lots that we think, the coverage is going to control a bit, but perhaps not as much as you all might like. And so that's kind of where we're looking at focusing the efforts. On the attics and basements, we did talk a bit about that last week. And I think the feeling is that it's on that third floor, whether it's a finished attic or it's not finished yet, they finish it later. That's what is probably going to lead to a bulkier looking house, right? Taller, bigger, on all floors. So our feeling was that we should include those areas, the habitable areas of an attic, in the FAR calculation, so that they're counting, right? So that they're part of that restriction. On the basement side, I think the feeling was that a lot of those basements exist now, and you're seeing people finish them. That is contributing less to a feeling of bulk, an impression of bulk from the street than the attic would be. So the feeling there was that we would not count basements. However, one thing that I think came out of that is, well, what happens if by not counting the basements in FAR, we're incentivizing people to build up the lot, regrade the lot, so that they can put in that basement. And that would create a visual impact on a home. That would make it taller than its neighbors. Most likely, it would probably just appear bigger from the street. So when we talked about that, the feeling is that we should look at some of the zoning definitions for finished grade, building height, to make sure that we're not having an unintended consequence of incentivizing people to build up the grade. So we're looking at, and Robert just sent around some suggestions today, but adjusting the building height so that it's measured, I think either from the pre-construction grade or the post-construction grade, whichever is lower. So, you don't get to build it up on a hill and then start from there. You start from the lower number.
So on that, not talking about the basement, talking about the attic. The attic space on my house, there's a third floor. And the ceiling, I happen to be on the third floor right now, so I'm looking up. It's 7.5 feet. It's not 8 feet. 7.5 feet, but it's a full floor. I mean, it's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and whatever. It's a full floor, and I'm concerned that people would not be able to do that. Number one, and well, really, that's it. I mean, would they be able to? Would they be able to? I don't know if anybody wants to do it. Maybe nobody will ever want to do this, but if anybody wants to do it, it's here and it's lovely. And if somebody, I don't know, I just want to know your thoughts on it, whether it's something that's doable or not doable.
Well, I think if it's allowed, they'll do it. And I guess the question is that something you want? Are you seeing in newly constructed homes that people do have walk-up attics, or even not walk-up, but some type of finished attics? Is that creating a sense of a larger home? It's less of an issue, right? Because the building stock exists.
I'm not talking about an attic. I'm talking about a third floor. That's what I have, a third floor.
Okay.
And it's lovely. I don't have an attic. I have no attic. So that's
right. That's fine. It's a finished third floor.
But it's a finished third floor, and it's terrific. So I just don't want to inhibit people from enlarging their house if they're willing to go without an attic, to not put in an attic and just have dormers and rooms. Right.
Yeah. So this would not prohibit that. It would just count it in the overall calculation of floor area ratio. So it would mean that they could not also have a much larger house all around. So if they want to have a finished third floor, then they may not be able to expand as much on the ground floor. Would be the answer. So
And also, Robert,
you have to have an architect work with them and figure out what what the priorities are.
Robert will correct me if I've got this wrong, but your house, Joe, early 20th century, had a walk-up attic, a walk-up third floor. Today, that would require a sprinklered house.
Right.
Because the state codes changed about occupied third floors. Am I right, Robert? So.
And you may run into height limitations as well, particularly in newer construction, because people want higher ceilings throughout the house. So you may be bumping up against that 30-foot height requirement, which is existing.
Susan, speaking of that, how do you avoid the situation that we had with a commercial property on Depew Street, where because of the change in the grade from one end to the other, it allowed consistently higher volume? Is that, Robert, am I at all summarizing that correctly?
That particular project actually didn't really change the grade. That was the natural topography.
Right. No, I'm not saying that they changed the grade. I'm saying because of the natural topography, they're allowed to apply the limits of one side of the topography to the whole project, right?
No, they have to take the grade points around every side and facade of the building and create the average around every side, and then it's a weighted average, and they came up with a determination that's an average grade for the entire site. So they didn't get one side. They had to take into account every aspect of that, every side.
But does that, I guess my question is, I don't know if this applies to residential, but if one side of your lot is 10 foot lower than the other side, can you effectively go over the 30-foot height, let's say, on the higher side because of the averaging effect, or no?
It would be somewhere in the middle.
It would appear higher on the low side,
Right.
and appear lower on the high side.
Right.
I mean,
And then
I
that's
guess
just the way your building height is measured across the board, whether it's residential or commercial, and that's existing.
So to clarify a little bit, 70 Memorial, that project on Cooley side is actually an additional story. So when you look on Cooley side, you think this is not zoning compliant. They didn't take the highest side, they didn't take the lowest side, they get an average. But you also had in zoning at the time, on a stricter side, you can't be 1.5 total height of the overall. So there's still another limitation on how tall that high side can be.
Okay.
Susan, could you explain, this is sort of following on David's question, the example that you did give with respect to the basement and the grade. Could you explain that again a little bit? Because I'm not sure I totally followed the concern you had there.
Right. So the concern is that right now the definition of building height, it's measured from the finished grade, which means after construction is finished.
Right.
Than before. So in theory, you could have someone buy a lot, regrade the whole, bring the whole lot up.
Mm-hmm.
Then where that building height, the bottom starts, the measurement starts, is at a higher level than it was previously. And the reason that we would, unintentionally be incentivizing that perhaps is because the basement that goes sort of underneath all of that is not counted in FAR. So it's kind of free space.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In theory, right? To be able to finish your basement without, creating an outward appearance of bulk is a good thing. But if you're bringing the whole height of the house up to do that, that is quite a visual impact, especially in neighborhoods where, you might have a lot of Cape Cods from the mid-century where, they're just lower houses than what's built today anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
So new house is going to be higher in terms of building height. But if you're building a hill to start with, the impact would be even greater. So the change that we would suggest is make that building height start to get measured from the pre-construction. Well, actually, Robert, what you were suggesting today was the lower of the two. So whichever is lower, whether it's before you start construction or after you height, you may dig it down actually. And in that case, the building height would start to be measured from a lower point. So what we want to make sure it comes from the lower point. So you avoid kind of a manipulation in order to get essentially a 3-story house, including the basement.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Also, Peter, do you have a question? Peter Russell?
Yes, good evening. I live on Ashland Avenue, and I'd just like to pick up on a couple of the points of your discussion just now. Looking at the new construction going up next to us, I think we would support the comment made about how to deal with the grade, because if you look at the house next to us from the back, it is full 3 stories. And there's a lot of bulk, period. Secondly, I would support what you were saying about the attic as well. And I noticed on the last page of Susan's memo, there was reference to the high ceiling requirements in some of the other communities where they used a weighted formula to allow for that, or to create a trade-off which the owner has to deal with. And I think that's a good approach both for the attic and maybe the ceiling question. Okay. And my third point is a question for y'all. I was looking at some of the census and American Community Survey information for Pleasantville going back some years. And as I recall, there is a phenomenon where the average person per household in the village is shrinking. And I think that's probably a phenomenon across the county or maybe across the country. And I think that's just an argument to support trying to use something close to the median figures which the analysts are coming up with. I mean, it allows a good flexibility for people building new homes, but it also somehow helps keep it in scale with the community as a whole. Thank you.
Yeah, that's accurate. Across the country, we're seeing just smaller and smaller families, fewer children.
In bigger and bigger houses.
Yeah, bigger and bigger. I don't understand that. Everybody wants a gym, I guess, in their basement, media rooms, whatnot, but they are having fewer kids.
So, I mean, one important piece of this, I think, is that the FAR proposal as it's starting to take shape is not likely to have much of an effect on most folks.
Right.
Fair to say, Susan?
Yeah, and that's something that that's the next kind of step that we've already started looking at, and we certainly looked at it on the lower end, the smaller lots, to make sure that we're not, making all of them non-conforming. And basically most of them are non-conforming now, but even a little bit bigger lots, we want to make sure that we're not, creating significant non-conformities and reason to go to the zoning board. And I think I feel pretty confident that we would not be doing that because we have some of these existing controls. So I think Peter, you really put it well. It's about the trade-offs. So it's not disallowing these things from happening. It's that if you want to have a finished base or finished attic or third floor, if you want to expand your house, then you can. It's just you have kind of a window within which to do it, and it may mean that you can expand it in a different way. So you can't necessarily have all your cake and eat it too.
So are you saying then that an old house, a house that is in the village already, 20 years old, 100 years old, doesn't really matter, and somebody wants to expand on the third floor, let's say, they can just do it, even though no,
that would count. That would count toward their FAR. I think what we're looking at is only the habitable part, which is 7.5 feet or more, would count. So, again, it doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just, they'd have to look and see how much FAR they have to give in their current lot. And if they're over a threshold, then they may need to get a variance. But again, I think that's another reason to perhaps exempt some of those smallest lot homes, because those do tend to be some of the oldest homes that probably have less room just overall to expand. So
Right,
we don't want to prevent them from doing
Robert
anything.
had something to say.
Yeah, just to add, so if that's the case, Joe, and somebody comes in and wants to create habitable space in an existing attic, nothing's changing on the exterior, they would have to show us compliance with the entire house with FAR now, which they hadn't done in the past. Now, certain instances may create a variance, but that's a variance good chance you'd get because you're not changing the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah, but they'd have to go for the variance. Just going for the, I mean, people go for variances all the time, but you know, you're not guaranteed to get a variance. It's a crapshoot, really. And so, like, I don't want to put people in a position where they've got to ask permission, where they can be denied. You know, if there's an older home and somebody wants to improve the home and maybe make more space on the third floor, I don't know, but if they wanted to make more space on the third floor, they should just be able to do it. That's how I feel about it. You know, it's an existing home, and they can do what they can do, if, you know, without this law. That's all. I'm concerned about older homes, smaller older homes.
Well, one thing we can look at is whether to exempt attics that are in homes existing as of the date of the adoption of the regulation. So that would essentially.
Reasonable, right?
I'm
I
sorry?
mean, that would solve, Joe, your point was, I mean, first off, virtually all of the homes that have convertible third floors, habitable third floors, are older homes, right? Nobody was building houses like that in the 40s, 50s, 60s. They were all before then.
That's probably right.
And nowadays, in order to make it habitable space, if it had not been before, you have to sprinkler it, which is a big climb. That has nothing to do with us. That has to do with the state.
Right.
That typically does end up stopping people from wanting to do it, because that is a big cost.
Mhm.
So just to say, and I'm not patting myself on the back, believe me, but I have not sprinkled this third floor because I have access to various windows. There's a porch roof on the front and there's a porch roof on the back, and there are ways. And he didn't make me put a sprinkler in. So and I did the job. So
But it was existing habitable space.
it was existing habitable space. That is true. There were two small rooms, and we
Grandfather.
And that's why it's different, right? Am I right, Robert? But if your attic is where you have, you know, boxes and luggage, and you want to turn it into a bedroom and a bathroom, the state code says you have to sprinkler it. And that's, as Robert just said, what kills the idea for lots of folks.
Yeah,
Folks who
so
are-
we can make it so that zoning doesn't kill it, and that's fine, you know,
Yeah, right.
because it doesn't create new bulk in an existing house. And
I
that's
mean,
really-
I'd have to
concerned
think
about it.
further about it, but as you suggested, Susan, it seems reasonable to say, if you have an existing house that can be converted to habitable space on the third floor with no exterior changes, that the FAR would not apply.
Right.
That would be reasonable to say, right? You're not
Right,
changing the outside of the
yeah.
house, right?
Right, and so this would really be focused on new construction.
When someone says they want to, you know, tear off the roof and build a habitable third floor where they once had a crawl space, that would be controlled by the FAR.
Right. Right.
Seem reasonable, Joe?
I don't know. I just don't know. It's hard to. It's hard for me to envision like what you're really. I don't think you're anybody's. It's not. It's everybody's just trying to express themselves, but it's a little bit difficult for me to get a handle on it. That's all.
Understand. So, I mean, I think that from your standpoint, the reassuring piece of this is that if we added an FAR at the level we're currently considering, not very many people would have any trouble complying. Fair to say, Robert?
Correct.
So you know, we're trying essentially to try to manage bulk at the outer edge of what people might want to do.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part too is a lot of the older homes now. I've been in a lot of the houses in town, probably more than the people that possibly are on here. A lot
More
of
than the
the
people who live in them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the older houses, the attics are finished to some extent, whether they actually utilize them as a bedroom or whatnot. So we do try to work with the people and understand from the state code, not just to say this is it and that's the situation. But a lot of the basements are cellars and they're not stores, so that wouldn't apply. So it's almost impossible to have something to where you know for sure it's going to cover every basis. Somebody's going to experience at some point, regardless of what we write.
Right.
You're trying to get the majority under it. So where they're compliant. All of zoning, that's why you have variances. variance is in place because zoning is not going to be applied to every scenario.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right, so anybody else have thoughts on this they want to weigh in? I mean, if, unless folks feel otherwise, I think, BFJ is often and running to write the draft code.
And I think that might help to crystallize things for folks. I know it's sort of nebulous and we're just talking about it in theory. But you'll have it in front of you before too.
Sounds good to me.
Great.
This is Tom.
I'm good with it
Murphy.
too.
Hey, Tom.
Okay.
I was wondering, is the data that was used for the analysis going to be made available?
Sure.
Sure. It's 99% from Westchester County GIS. So it's actually publicly available. There's a lot of spreadsheets I could send you. We supplemented it with information from Robert on some specific, more recent homes to make sure that we were capturing up to date. But it's all Westchester County GIS.
So Susan, I've got Tom's email, so send me your spreadsheets. I'll forward it to him, and Tom, I'll send you the download from our assessment database as well.
Thank you very much.
Great.
All right. Anything else for Susan before we release her from our bondage? Is that you saying you had something, Peter, or are you reaching to disconnect? Sounds like he's okay.
Great.
All right. Thank you,
Good
Susan.
night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good
Much
night.
appreciated.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Robert. All right. We're supposed to talk to Matt at 7:30 and it's only 7:28. Do you think we should wait 2 minutes?
I think he's ready to roll.
All right. Hello, Matt Trainer.
How are you, Mr. Mayor?
I don't know. Okay.
I mean, if you really want to put me out,
Summer camp programs.
oh yeah,
Make us feel optimistic, Matt.
What's that?
Make us feel optimistic about the summer.
Optimistic in terms of having a plan. Sure, no problem. So the good news in general and where we're at is that we've had an initial meeting with the Department of Health. We've gotten some good information from them. So long story short, they are, as last year, allowing camps to happen. So that's the overall good news. The harder news is that the municipalities really have to navigate exactly how they are going to make those things happen. So they're leaving it really up to the municipalities to figure things out. And then, of course, we're always subject to their approval anyway. Subsequent to the Department of Health meeting, Eric, Noreen, and I were also able to meet with Mary Fox Alter and some folks from the school district. So in terms of facilities, we would normally have our camp over at BRS. BRS nor any other of the school facilities really is they're not going to be available due to some projects that they have going on. And obviously summer's a good time for them to get those projects done. They also have their own summer programs that they have to accommodate. So really from our perspective, using any school facility is out at this point. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In regards to the health department, whenever you are in any structure at this point, and that'll also include tents with 3 sides or more, you're essentially subject to half capacity. So even if we were in a school building, that's great from an operational standpoint, but from an attendance standpoint, that would kind of set us back in a hole right off the bat. So really where we are at is looking at an all outdoor camp, or in as much of an outdoor camp scenario as possible. Eric, did you forward the board that Excel spreadsheet that I had given to you?
I have not.
Okay, so essentially the idea would be we would try to run camp out of 3 sites. So it would be Parkway. Parkway would be basically divvied up into two locations, A and B. The front field would be one sort of location, the backfield being another, and then the third location would be Nanahagan, obviously, because of the pool. In regards to transportation is another one of those issues that is probably not cost effective to engage. When you are looking at the buses, you're looking at, again, half capacity. So essentially double the trips that would be needed to transport the same amount of children. So really what we've done is we've narrowed things down to, again, those three separate locations, as well as a stay at camp this summer. In regards to rainy days would be subject to cancellation. We really don't have any viable indoor space. We would also want to avoid any close exposure and taking out that social distancing aspect. The groups that we are required to maintain really pretty similar to your school classrooms. The idea of cohorts will apply. We can put a maximum of 15 children in any one group. That does not include staff. So essentially it would be 15 campers plus 3 to 4 staff, depending. The tricky thing with staff regarding camp will be that, typically if you have staff members that call out sick, or you're short in one group and one group has 2 staff members today, but the other one is heavy one, you could just take somebody from that one group and move them over to the other. That is not being allowed. So you essentially have to maintain the same groups, and that includes staff for the entirety of the session. Really, that's kind of the story. The 3 groups we would look at: kindergarten and first grade would be one camp, if you will. Second, third, and fourth would be the second age group that we would sort of break up into a group. And then fifth and sixth would be the third and final. And what they would do is they would pretty much rotate throughout the summer drop-off points, right? So one day they're at Nanahagan, the next day they're dropped off at Parkway A, the day after Parkway B, and so on and so forth, so that they're all kind of getting their opportunity to swim relatively on equal timing. In the past, we've allowed families to choose between 1 session or 2 sessions. This kind of would require us to have campers commit to the full 6 weeks in terms of pricing, both from a cohort perspective as well as an ability to sort of move them around feasibly. Considering 15 kids per camper group, we're looking at about 60 kids maximum in 2 of those groups, and 90 maximum in the third.
How many did we have 2 years ago in our camp program?
Between the 3 camps, we had about 300.
So you're talking about half capacity now, or a third capacity?
Well, no, you're talking about half, but I doubt we will get that number. We could, but between the 3 groups.
You mean based on demand?
Correct. Yeah.
But how have we gauged demand for the summer?
You can do another survey if that.
No, I'm just saying. It's like you said, you don't think we'll get it. I'm just curious how you're.
So across the county, the pattern. That's what the pattern has been. So
for next summer, there is no.
No. For last summer. So that's what many of. We're still in the same scenario that we were in last summer.
Well,
in regards to being able to operate.
Well, I think it's going to be a very different summer in terms of people's attitudes, for sure. We've lived with this for a year. We know things about masking that we were a little bit unsure of at the beginning of last summer. So I think, just as a marketer, since that's my background, I'd be very hesitant to make too many assumptions about what people are going to do based on what they did last summer. My concern is that, I think people who, families in the upper incomes in Pleasantville had options last summer because there were camps in other states and camps even in Westchester that were open and available. So our option this summer, if we're running it, really is going to support sort of the middle class of Pleasantville. And it may be the only way that those parents get the ability to work uninterrupted. And I think we really should do a very careful job of making sure we know who we're serving, what makes it, most useful for them, and to meet demand. And that, because, if we turn kids away, that means those parents may not have something else that they can afford to do that lets them work. That's a very big economic impact on them potentially. So I think we got to take this mission very, very seriously.
Well, we're not endlessly flexible about staff either, right, Matt?
Correct. Yeah. So all of the restrictions that applied from a numbers perspective, both in regards to what I had just explained about camp, but also in regards to the pool, are still applicable. So the numbers that we have to maintain are dictated by the Board of Health.
But if for instance, if you opened a fourth location, obviously that would reduce the amount of time everybody spent at the pool. But is it only seasonal staff that are the constraint to that, or what's the assumption that so if you went ahead and did a survey and said how many people are going to commit to this, and the number came back as 40 more than you're planning for, and you said, well, to do that we need to open a fourth location. What is the thing that keeps you from doing that? Is it your permanent staff, or is it
No, that's a seasonal staff issue.
right? So and in terms of outdoor space available, is there other outdoor space under our control that you could use in that case?
So there is the part of the added cost. If you look at Parkway and then, a good decent amount of any other location besides Nanahagan, shade is
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah. So
I think that's a real concern.
So we've looked into tent rental costs, and essentially you're talking in between $5,000 and $6,000 for the summer per tent. Initially our wish list, if you will, would have been to take one at each location. So 2 at Parkway, and then 1 over at Nanahagan. If cost became a factor in that decision, I would sacrifice the Nanahagan option simply because there are trees, there are opportunities for shade over there. But 95-degree days to have kids running around in that hot sun all day isn't going to be feasible.
Yeah. So I guess the thing that I'm concerned about is I want to figure out what the community's needs are and what their priorities are. And you're being very responsible in terms of your budget and in terms of the sort of prudent management of what you expect to have available to you. But to me, this is potentially a very big deal to a whole bunch of parents. And I would rather actually know, well, what will it take to, it's not, you're absolutely right. The shade is a big issue. And while you don't want enclosed tents, having this sort of pavilion style open tents that can provide shade and provide shelter, because the other thing we haven't talked about is, no forecast for rain, but rain arrives for 20 minutes. Are you, sending all the kids home? What are you doing exactly? I think having some kind of shelter might be a useful thing. Now, it's not, the program is not going to operate on the same financial basis if we do that, obviously, if it's $5,000 per tent per summer for the summer. But I think I really think we should take a look at what this would take to do it right and figure out how important it is to the parents in the village. And if it's very important, then consider that as a potential investment for us to make this summer.
And truthfully, I view it as a one summer problem.
Right.
It's not going to be the following year and the following year and the following year. It's a one summer problem. If we have to suck it up, for example, on not Parkway Field, on Soldiers and Sailors Field, and put one there, or somewhere else, a $5,000 tent. Yeah, are we making money? No, we're not making money. But we're providing things for the community. That's
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we can keep an extra 100 families working and it's $50,000 for the village, I would vote for that.
But I think we should have to do a survey because I'm a little skeptical, David, that the numbers are going to be high.
I'm not.
I mean, I can't
skeptical
say
or-
objectively, but I would be.
I'm not. Just as a marketer, I'm not skeptical or unskeptical. I have no idea. I think we have to check. Because like whenever I think I know what people want, I'm not right.
So Matt, if you were to open a fourth, that means kids are at the pool every fourth instead of every third?
Yes. Yeah, and the main
Less
issue is
appealing, I would think.
once you get them there in the morning, that's kind of where they're going to be for the day.
Is there room to have a group in the pool and a group in the park next to the pool?
No. The main reason being is that we theoretically are now going to open to the public at 12:30. So we've got to get all of those kids rotated in for swim time by that 12:30 mark.
So who else is during the week? Who else is using the pool before 5 p.m. other than the general public? Are there swim meets and stuff like that we're expecting?
Swim team to be determined. But yeah, that's the group. It's basically the public.
Because the other thing is, I think it's nice for people during the day, during the week, to be able to go to the pool for sure. And as the pool is set up, I certainly would imagine that that people would use that. But on the other hand, if this is of high interest to a bunch of people, then we could choose to use it for the camp until 3 p.m. and open up at 3 or whatever.
So
David,
that would mean that the families that had memberships would have restricted hours, right?
Well, so that's
yeah,
during
we're
the
gonna
day.
be up in arms if we suggest that.
Well, I just look, guys. I'm not judging what the community needs, but I think we need to ask what the community needs, because as lovely as it is, if you have enough money to not be working and take the kids to the pool during the day, during the week, I'm not sure if I would necessarily immediately prioritize that above the family, with 2 nurses who have to go to their jobs and want to put the kids into a summer camp. So I just want to have the information to make those decisions.
I think it's worth getting that information. You're making some assumptions about the people who take their kids to the pool.
I'm making no
That I
assumptions.
think
I'm
are
just
not
saying
fair,
it could be one thing or another, but I think we need to know the whole picture to make the decision.
So Matt, how does lunch work?
So they would have an assigned lunch period that would stretch across the entire camp group that's over at Nanahagan. So you'd rotate periods in between, essentially 40-minute periods in between 9 and 12:30, and then at that point in time, everybody would kind of sit down at lunch, and then we would rotate us just like school. You would rotate them in 40-minute sessions.
So how did it? I mean, in the era when, in the past, when kids were at the pool,
Yep.
they could order lunch from the pool concession, right?
Correct.
How would that work in this scenario, or would it?
It again, that kind of depends. If there's no Bob DeBono and Westchester Food Service and a number of the other vendors that have been around for a while elected to not necessarily run their businesses last summer because of the financial impact.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure what that would be if there was no, buy lunch option at the pool. then they would be asked to bring their lunch. The other aspect here is that in past years, essentially half of our camp were out at trips basically every day.
Right.
So you're kind of taking a similar number and you're just juggling them throughout periods, during the day and actually keeping them busy on site as opposed to off site. So there's not much total wiggle room for
Right.
that.
All right. So, and then, of course, it remains unclear what June, July, August will look like, but assuming there's a mask mandate, that would be the guideline.
Yep.
And then at lunch, the kids are separated? How does that work?
As long as they're in their pods of
Yes.
15,
Yes.
they can sit together. They can eat lunch. That's fine.
Right.
So long as they are separated by a distance of 12 feet from the other pod.
From the other pod.
Correct.
Okay.
What
So
about-
Do we assign pod color T-shirts to keep track of them?
we could. We absolutely could.
That's a good, actually, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Oh no, a yellow is with the green.
Well, so now in regards to the pool operation itself as a separate animal, I'm sure most of you have heard the various types of plans that other municipalities worked with and organizations like Westwood where, they were charging for permits and then, you signed up for an AM or a PM time slot kind of thing. My thought on this was we can actually make pretty good use of Community Pass in the sense that we can charge the regular fee for pool permits and actually release time slots like we would for classes on Community Pass, where if folks knew that they were definitely looking to go swimming at a specific time, they could pre-register for that time via Community Pass, just like they would any other class. And we can do it that way, just so that there's, flexibility on the user's end to be able to do that.
All right, so that would be, sounds like a good idea, although work in progress to figure it out.
Yeah, but that's the direction that we're kind of looking at.
And has the health department tipped their hat about whether they imagine that the same guidelines that prevailed last summer will prevail this?
That's their expectation. Of course, they've acknowledged that this is a ever evolving scenario, and it is completely possible that if numbers drastically dip and we start seeing this thing go away based on vaccinations and whatnot and everything else, it's possible that they'll lift some things. But as of now, they're still looking for half capacity. They are still looking for 12-foot distance between groups of 6 on pool decks. Your mask needs to be on unless you are sitting in your location. Other than that, if you are walking, let's say from your space on the deck to the side of the pool, you need to have your mask on. And then basically the second you get in, you take the mask off and you get in the pool. And then vice versa on the way out.
Shane is asking, how old does a child need to be to go to the pool without a parent?
David responded 36.
Yes.
How old are you, Shane? I believe we say 12 or 13. I can verify that for you.
I have one more question about summer camp. What do you do when it's a really hot day and they're at Parkway Field or something like that? Do you have any ideas?
Well,
of how to deal with
so
that?
that's the other sort of consideration, right? So if you recall in past years, and they have done it where, just like they would cancel an athletic practice or whatever it is, once the heat index hits a certain amount of a certain degree, and there is no opportunity for constant shelter or cooling, the guideline would be to cancel the activity.
Okay.
Could we have, is it crazy to imagine, some sort of misting sprinklers?
Well, that would be part of it. So I would talk to Mario, we would get the irrigation going a couple times a day. We would purchase a couple kiddie pools, just a couple lawn sprinklers for kids to be able to cool off with. It may end up looking like we had 100 music festivals out there.
Just a couple slip and slides, they'll be set for the day.
Yeah, but those are all possibilities. But more so than just the plain rain, the thing that scares me during the summer are those pop-up thunderstorms. And they usually tend to hit you right at dismissal. It builds up all throughout the day, and then all of a sudden 2:30, 3 o'clock, boom, you get a 20-minute thunder shower, and 20 minutes later the sun's back out, and it's like it was never there. But those are the dangerous ones that always concern us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, anybody have further comments, thoughts?
No, and I apologize. I really don't want to offend anybody. I just think that it's easy when we're not all necessarily in this situation to not realize how much of a lifeline this can be to our community. And I just want to do the work to make sure we know what the demand is and what the situations that people are. Because, I would certainly be willing to devote more resources to doing this in a way that's, most helpful to the people who most need the help.
So what's the way forward on that? A quick survey?
Yeah, do another survey, and particularly find out how many people would be, if the town camp is running, given, I would suggest we try to hold the price to whatever it was 2 years ago, and see what the demand is.
And make sure we have a description so people know.
Can you take a shot at what the questions might be, David?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, if you want to include anything that you think we should ask, I can write
I'll
it.
get it started, and then I can hold it up.
Send it through Eric, and I'm happy to rewrite it for you guys.
All right.
I have a quick question. Matt, I think I saw a recent email about, I don't know if that this is the same thing, but it was like programs for kids at the rec center for soccer or other sports. Is that different than this?
Yeah. So in the basically the way we're looking at the spring is the same way that we operated in the fall. All outdoor programming with our table set up and social distancing and all outside and all that stuff. So similar to how we did things in the fall.
So would that be running simultaneously while the camp is happening?
No. Yeah, either weekends or like right before or right after the camp season.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. We started you 2 minutes early and we're finishing 1 minute early. So we are just like, you could set your watch by us tonight.
Just amazing.
Thank you, Matt.
Sure.
Much appreciated. Challenging times. Appreciate your professional
Yeah,
guidance.
Matt, I'm not trying to be hard on you. I really, you're doing an important thing for the community right now. So appreciate it.
Glad I do it.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Next up, the governor's authorization about property tax deferment and installment payments.
That's right. So this was actually passed by both houses and been sitting on the governor's desk for a couple months now. But as of last week or the week before, he finally signed the bill, which allowed local legislative bodies to pass resolution enabling the deferral of tax payments for as much as 120 days past its deadline. So we kind of want to get on the agenda now as an FYI. We're waiting for further legal guidance from the village attorney who is dissecting the legislation. I mean, we've got a variety of questions. Can this be retroactive? So on and so forth. So the details are not out yet, but we did want to get it on your radar. It's probably going to pick up steam and we'll start reading more about it. But this is brand new legislation.
So does it address the question that came up the last time this was considered at the state level, that folks who pay their property taxes through a mortgage escrow have already paid it. And the chance to defer payment is simply a mechanism that, in that case, would allow the escrow agent to hold on to their money and not pay it for some period of time. Is that covered by this?
That's one of the questions we had for the village attorney. Certainly, that's a big one.
It seems
Because I
to
know-
me, what was the feeling like for the past year in terms of people paying their taxes and paying them on time? Was it a much greater deferment or failure to pay, or did it seem like it was a normal cycle?
Yeah, we're actually tracking really close to where we've been the past 2 years.
I mean, we all signed the tax arrears list a month or so ago. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was, let's say it was, an extra, 50 people or 100 people. That's a lot, for late payments, deferred payments, things like that. Or if it's just going to be the same as last year,
Well, so what I said, I wasn't meaning to deprive individuals of taking advantage of this. I would just hate to think that it offered a modest windfall to escrow agents who already had somebody else's money.
That's right.
And now had the opportunity not to pay it.
That's right.
That's true. But also people who can pay, but they decide, well, if they're going to give me 3 months, I'll hold my money for 3 months. It's like, and it's going to really put a damper on, the budget process and keeping things, afloat.
I mean, I don't think we're going to get a choice.
Well,
It's not an opt-in, is it, Eric?
it is an opt-in.
For sure?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's see what the details are.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know what the damage would be to the village. And the mayor's right on escrow agents there. They shouldn't be exempt at all, but if you can avoid it, so.
And by the way, it would only be effective, it would only be allowable for the time period that the COVID-19 state of emergency is in effect. Which,
As long as that.
right, which is $1 million question in and of itself. So more details to come on this, but did want to get it on your radar. But to Joe's point, there is not an alarming number of past due tax bills that would make us worried. I mean, I think that was one of our top concerns at the beginning of this pandemic, was we were going to be running into some cash flow issues as a municipality, not only us, but municipalities all over the place. That has not, fortunately, come to fruition for the village.
Continuation of the work session that was between 7 and 8 tonight. So the discussion you wanted to engage, Nicole, was the question about how to proceed on leaf blower regulations.
Well, before we get into that, we have the chief on the line. We wanted to touch on police reform, just the path forward.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Hey, chief.
Everybody. Nope. Sorry about that. Good evening. How is everyone?
Are you outside?
I apologize. I'm picking my son up from basketball practice.
I don't think you need to apologize for that.
It's a short ride home, but I'll happily wait through the leaf blower conversation if you'd like to take that on first.
You're improving my overall impression of Zoom, so that's good.
You look pretty good. You got yourself into a pool of light there.
Yeah, figured it out pretty well. So far, so good.
All right. So as I mentioned in the announcement section, one thing that came across the wire today, and I forwarded it to all of you guys, is the announcement that the county is going to be having a Facebook Live event at 2:00 tomorrow about the county task force proposals. But included in that email, which I forwarded to all of you, is a bullet list of some of the items that are part of the recommendation. So they don't seem to have let the report out yet. It has to go to the County Board of Legislators for approval. But the interesting piece about that is I think there are a few items on this set of recommendations that they have that are potentially useful to us. So we'll see about that. But one of them is to establish liaison officers at each municipal department trained to response to hate incidents. There is a bullet point that says establish an open disciplinary process. Not entirely sure what that will look like, but right below that, pass county laws to create the Office for Police Accountability to investigate allegations of misconduct by county police department officers. And it'd be interesting to see exactly how they intend to structure that. And expand the use of specialized teams to respond to mental health calls county-wide and explore additional co-response initiatives. So bunch of other things on the list, but those alone are matters of interest to us, especially the mental health stuff. So Eric, Noreen, the chief, and I had a conversation the other day, starting to sift out a set of sort of categories that we believe are almost certain to be part of the recommendations. Looking for comment from all of you. They included recommendations about our data collection, data management, and data mining, not only to make sure we're collecting the right information, but to be able to run timely reports to understand what's going on in many areas. Another of the subjects, obviously, is adjustment as needed to the use of force protocol. And also on the list, I think adjustments to our disciplinary review process and likely some adjustments to the complaint management process. So what do others have on their minds?
I had sort of a broad question about how we should go about this. I mean, I have a few things I could add to the list, but I was wondering whether everybody thinks it would be good for us all to review each of the categories we looked at, or if it would be helpful if we sort of divvied it up a little bit to, look back through some of these sessions that we've held and pick out some of the recommendations that were made that we think would be helpful. Just because we've accumulated a fair amount of feedback at this point, I'm wondering what everybody's thoughts are on how to best sort of sift through that information and organize it.
I'm open to any of the above, other than to say I am happy to give everybody the transcripts of all 5 of the things so far. Thank you, Noreen. And when you sift through them, especially in a couple of them, lots of good information, but not all that many specific comments. So some of it is teasing out of what we heard areas that feel like they're ripe for improvement.
Right. Well, in the last meeting, there were 2 things that jumped out. One is there's obviously an interest in having more of a presence on foot of police officers. I've heard more about that actually outside of the context of that meeting, but and then the other was an interest in increased training to deal with mental health and other kinds of special issues that police officers might encounter. But I'm just wondering, I want to make sure we don't miss anything. So I'm wondering if some dividing up, not that we can't all look at everything, obviously, but I wonder if dividing up of areas a little bit might be a way to be more efficient about it and make sure we, look through the
Sure.
There's sort of 5 of us in 5 areas, right? So maybe it makes sense to take one each and coordinate with Eric and the chief.
So how about this? I mean, if anybody would particularly like to sift through the transcript of a specific meeting, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just send to one to each of us.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested in the feedback process because Eric had sort of talked about being open to that, and that obviously falls within the realm of things that I know about from other industries.
Sure.
I would be fine with anything.
Yeah, anything.
For me, if possible, I was interested in the procedures to, I think it was like the second one that was all about the procedures and how they're trained about how stops are done or things like that.
Training and de-escalation.
Yes, that goes with kind of what I'm doing anyway.
Okay, great. So I'll send training and de-escalation to you, Paul. I'll send yours was the complaint and disciplinary review piece, David, right?
Yes.
And then Joe and Nicole, random other two, and keep one for myself. I've been through each of them in a general way, but I think it's a great idea. No doubt, different set of eyes will have new stuff to come from. And again, I'm at pains to tell everybody what we're trying to do is come up with some stuff we can really do and do soon, and then make sure we have the list of things we need to keep talking about. So.
May I ask a question that came up? I don't know if this is the right venue in which to ask, but with respect to police complaints, Chief, you explained very well how it worked. I was wondering if it would be appropriate or whether there's precedent for police complaints coming to the board as well, so that it would not just be internal to the police department. Is that something that happens at all, or what are?
So currently, there's no formalized process for the complaints to go outside of the police department. That's done for a number of reasons. Part of that is undoubtedly what was tied to 50A prior to the repeal.
Right.
But then there's also there were other concerns as far as, and those concerns remain, about sort of context and efficiency and, the complaint process, like I said, needs to be fair to both the officer and the community and the complainant. And so we try to walk that line whereby we meet all those needs. So obviously the complaint process and the review of complaints is going to look different after we go through this process. We know that, we expect that. The specifics of how that's going to happen are obviously where is the tricky part. But I would expect that these things are kept inside. The police department exclusively is probably is something in the past. The thing to keep in mind, one of the driving forces also is that were there ever to be a disciplinary hearing, the village court sits as the police commissioners and have to make determinations, hear the evidence and the information, and they are not supposed to be predisposed to a decision either way on that. So there have always been legal hurdles to more disclosure because of that. But I think it's not unrealistic to think that there will be some changes to the complaint review process going forward.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. There are also some collective bargaining issues engaged with all of this, and our municipality, like all municipalities, have heard from counsel for their police unions on some aspects of that. So here's one thing that I think is going to be a helpful piece, and that is we're going to hear quite a bit more very soon from the county, especially as regard that subject.
So in addition to the disciplinary process, one of the things I think we'll talk about is adding a sort of a feedback loop that is not disciplinary, that can let us know how people are generally feeling about their interactions with police, and because it doesn't create any disciplinary action, gives us a better and easier metric, and also feels safer, or safer is not the right word, I apologize, feels easier for a citizen or a resident or anybody passing through to let us know an interaction, good, bad, or indifferent, that they had, with our police in a way that could be anonymous, but doesn't have to be, and allows us to compile more information and see trends.
Okay. I asked that question somewhat naively, but I would be interested in learning more about how other police departments are, kind of restructuring that process. What sort of models are out there that we might consider? And yeah, I will try and tune into the county presentation tomorrow, Peter, as well.
Which I'm sure is also going to be recorded, but oh yeah, in fact, at the bottom of that press release, it gives you a YouTube channel a link to follow it if you can't do it right at 2:00. So, at any rate, I think that ought to be very interesting stuff. So, more later, I'll send out those transcripts to each of the 4 of you, and that if it's reasonable to get that back in a week, then by our next meeting, I'll dump all of the stuff you guys have put together into a sort of omnibus outline for the next level of consideration.
Okay.
All right. Did you have anything else, Eric, before we go to the leaf blower question?
Eric Morrissey or Eric Grutzner?
Eric Morrissey. I think
Oh,
you're off the hook, Grutzner. Did he win the basketball game?
Just a practice tonight, but
right.
he went through. We don't get to watch the practices anymore, but he has an empty bottle of water, so I think it was a good practice.
All right, that's the guideline. All right.
I would just add, if we could get that feedback in a week. We have the forum on the 17th, and then a whole date on Thursday, the 25th, as a potential date to have a review of some of the reform ideas. So our timeline is currently lining up.
All right.
Okay.
So we've had discussions about how to proceed on the question of leaf blowers and some discussion both for and against the idea of engaging a community-wide survey on the subject.
Yeah, so I'll just to frame this a little bit. So Joe, in the last couple of meetings, has asked where we were with the leaf blower issue and suggested that, having had quite a bit of input from the community and having held a forum, that maybe it was time to take the next step. And I agree with him on that. So I had floated the idea of a survey. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go or not. I'm open to discussion on this personally, but I would like to figure out what the next step is so that we can move forward with this issue.
So I voiced my opinion in an email that I do not want to do a survey. It seems to me that we can just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and listen to the entire community and whatever. We've already listened to the entire community. We should just put together some language and decide whether or not we're going to move it or not. It's okay. I mean, anybody can have their opinion, but I just don't think it's worth going back to the community yet again to see their opinion when we've already got, emails and a hearing and everything. It's still going to go through a public hearing anyway. So it's sort of useless. So I was of the impression that the 4 of you wanted to put it out for a survey for the community, but then I heard that David gave a different opinion about what he wanted to do in terms of whether he wants a survey or not. So David, perhaps you could chime in on that.
I guess what I was saying is I agreed with your general point, Joe, that we don't, our sort of role is not to survey on every single thing that we're doing, because part of what we're doing is protecting minority rights. Part of what we're doing is seeing into a future that, people are not spending as much time as we're spending on this can't see. But part of what we're doing is putting the master plan for the village into effect, which has a lot of moving pieces. So I totally agree with you that we don't want to survey and everything. The reason I'm a little bit more open in this specific case is because this sort of came about because of complaints, certainly the Conservation Advisory Committee report and all that. But then, people have really strong feelings about this, and it's not breaking evenly on the normal lines either. So I would sort of like to have a more comprehensive view on what people are thinking and in what numbers, just because this is really more, we're intermediating how people are dealing with their neighbors essentially here, as opposed to creating infrastructure or doing something that has a long lasting effect. So that's the reason that I'd be curious to know, like on a survey basis, like how many people feel like they're affected and what they think is reasonable, and what goes too far. And there have been some interesting ideas that have come up about doing a library of things, which is if we buy 10 or 20 electric blowers and allow people to check them out either from the Mount Pleasant Public Library or through Parks and the Buildings and Grounds or whatever, are there ways that we can manage some of the specific issues that have come up for people? But I think it's hard to know unless you know the size of the problem overall. So that's, like I said, I agree with you. I have very mixed feelings in general about surveying everything, but this is one I'm sort of interested in.
I want you to know, though, that I still feel it's not necessary, but that's just me. So
My opinion on it is that, just looking at the survey that we did on the pool just today, I thought the presentation was incredibly informative because I have a better idea of how to serve our community and how to serve our residents the best that we can. There's been serious issues within the last year of accusations that this board is not transparent. How much more transparent could we be by doing a simple survey that we get people's opinions on what is going on? It seems to me as if it's like a tool that I can use. At the end of the day, we're going to be the ones deciding what we do forward, but it's good to know what people are thinking out there. And the pool has been something that I think for a long time has a lot of people very divided. So I think this is the perfect time to get that kind of tool and get that information to help us make a better decision. Because it's not something as simple as we're going to do this, and then there's going to be so many voices of so many people who are going to feel underrepresented, who are going to ask, how did you make that decision? Now, of course, we can say we did emails, we did one forum, but why would it hurt to kind of furthermore get more research to make it this isn't a little project that we're going to do. This is going to cost the village for a long time going further. So why wouldn't we want to have as much data as we can collect? That's just my opinion.
Actually, it's not going to cost the village anything. If we put some language in for months of the year, maybe days of the week, or whatever it is, well, you can't use a blower. That's it. If you don't want to do that, that's perfectly fine. But it doesn't cost the village anything unless you do a new, we're going to, loan out equipment to people. Then it costs a little bit of money. So that could be too. But it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. Every single law that we decide to pass, listen, if you go with a full-blown law of no leaf blowers, some people are upset. If you go with, we're not doing anything, we're leaving leaf blowers and anybody can use them, somebody's upset. And if you do anything in between, somebody's upset. It's just what's going to happen. And for example, the FAR law that we got, just as an example, it came on. We passed the resolution. I didn't pass the resolution. You guys passed the resolution. If you pass that resolution, now they're moving forward with a plan, and it's coming to fruition. And there's no survey on the FAR, whether you want to do it or not. I don't know why. It's pretty important. I think it's really important because it's all residential structures are going to be impacted. It's not going to be impacted anybody today, but it's going to be impacted if they want to do a change, if they want to make enlarge their house or raise their house or whatever it is, you know. So on one hand, you're not doing a survey. On the other one, survey after survey after survey after survey. It's ridiculous. Truthfully, it's ridiculous. That's the way I feel.
All right, so let me step in for a second. I think that the pool survey is an interesting example because I think that one was really beneficial. So the question is, what does something like the pool survey get at? And would this kind of survey serve a similar purpose or not, you know, or is it kind of beside the point? So in the pool survey, part of what you're doing is you're finding out how, you know, who's answering your survey, how they use the pool, what their history is with it. And then you're giving them sort of a range of choices and a range of options and getting a sense of what kinds of things people prefer, right? Do they want a kiddie pool that's enclosed or do they not want a kiddie pool that's enclosed? So I guess one question one might ask is, are we, in doing this kind of survey, I can read to you if you really want some of the questions I was thinking of. Are we conducting that kind of a survey, or are we duplicating the work of what's already been done by getting information through emails and so on? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Maybe David, since you're more of a pro in this department.
Yeah, I mean, so this is all about it's a friction issue. So the highest friction is doing something that takes an affirmative action where you don't have an easy conduit to doing it. Meaning, I write to the village. I saw a notice that I could write to the village. I find the email, I click through it, and I write to the village.
Mm-hmm.
On the opposite end would be if we called everybody in the village and just said, you know, what are your opinions?
Mm-hmm.
That would be the least friction. So a survey is a little bit in between because we've structured the questions. People can largely click and they don't have to give an input if they don't want to, right? So usually speaking, you know, generally speaking, you'll get more people to respond to that. I mean, I guess the place where the moment I became interested in potentially doing a survey is when, I don't know whether, Nicole, it was you or somebody else counted up the responses and said, well, you know, it's 2-to-1 people saying they want some kind of restriction versus not. And I think when you get into that kind of counting from people sort of sending in their feedback is where I become more interested in, in a stronger methodology.
In a quantitative. So here are a couple of specific questions. I thought if we had a survey, I feel like we should ask people if they live in Pleasantville and potentially to give us a name and an address, because I don't want to put out a survey that then we get responses from, you know, businesses outside, you know, influencers of one type or another. Then I think it would be potentially helpful to get some information about, you know, what kind of landscaping they do, if they hire out a landscaper, if they do it on their own, that kind of, I'm not going to go into all the details, don't worry. But the other thing is there are some general issues. I feel like the basic model that we're considering right now, and that maybe doesn't have consensus, but that has been going on for a while, is a seasonal ban of some kind, right? Which is to limit the time periods in which leaf blowers would be used. But then there are other suggestions that have arisen through these conversations, and not just suggestions, but also concerns that people have. You know, concerns with noise, concerns, for instance, with the number of leaf blowers that are used on a certain property at a given moment of time. Concerns about a new generation of leaf blowers that have a higher decibel level and just a higher impact overall. So the question of, would we ban certain kinds of very new, like the kinds that you ride on mowers, sorts of things. So I guess my question with that is, do you think a survey would be an appropriate way to figure that out? Or do you feel more comfortable, do the rest of you feel more comfortable just discussing that as a board? How do you feel about that aspect of things?
So, I can say for myself that it is a classic example of a circumstance where we, as Joe already pointed out, any step we would take, including taking no step, will not be satisfactory to some significant number of people. I don't mean to suggest that that's unusual. That happens with a lot of what we do, but I disagree and want to sort of recast what Joe said about the FAR discussion. First off, the resolution we passed was to undertake a study and to pay BFJ to do it. But secondly, we're proposing a change in a rather arcane piece of the zoning code that is not likely to have a significant effect on a significant number of people. What it is likely to do, however, is to limit development of a property at a level beyond what we have generally seen in the history of our community, and that's what gave rise to the consideration. So that's a different story than leaf blower regulations, which, among other things, would affect the village itself unless we hypocritically exempted ourselves from it. Our own parks and DPW people use leaf blowers and would need to find another means to do what they do, or to reassess whether that piece of what they do needs to be done. As you well know, there are plenty of people that make a very reasonable argument that we should do something, and there are plenty of people that make a reasonable argument that we shouldn't do something. Classic example of government telling you what you can and cannot do. I'm not saying that as some sort of libertarian, but it is something we ought to do with some caution in a circumstance when it's clear that lots of people disagree. When someone comes to me, as they have, and say, look, I'm an older person, I have an electric leaf blower on an extension cord, I use it in very modest ways, it's a whole lot easier for me at my age to blow the debris off my patio, I don't want you coming and telling me I can't do that. Perfectly reasonable thing to say, and I'm guessing, without having stood in this person's yard, that what they do offends almost no one. When an army of 4 or 5 landscapers on a combination of riding mowers and backpack blowers moves down the street from one house to the next, and it sounds like you're on the runway at LaGuardia, I think most people would say, whoa, if that had happened 30 years ago, everybody would be up in arms. And somehow we've arrived at a point where it's been kind of acculturated that, that's just a landscape team. So whatever we do is going to create some problems for some people. And I do think that our job here, given the level of disagreement, is to find some sort of a compromise position. And I do think a survey might help us get to that.
What do you guys think? I say no. Go ahead.
I say yes.
I say yes.
I say yes, as long as I don't have to write the whole thing.
No, I've already written a draft and I've gotten some feedback. I would ask, what's going on here? I would ask the rest of you for feedback too, but I wanted to get a sense about how people felt about a survey in general. The one thing I will say, and I sympathize with Joe in this respect, is I, for one, would like to do something. And so, I'm hoping that this can allow us to figure out what the next step is. If we do a survey, I would like to get it out quickly and try and get, feedback in a reasonable amount of time, and then figure out what the next step is from there.
I think that's fine and reasonable and appropriate.
Okay. So I'm happy to take charge. Like I said, I've already drafted questions and gotten some feedback. And then I would like to get obviously feedback from the rest of you as well. And I'm happy to take it to the next step after that.
Okay, and would we set this up as a Survey Monkey thing, or?
You know, I should call the pool task force, figure out how they did it. Yeah, something like that. And, you know, put it out on social media, and we can put it on our website and so on. I have a kid invasion going on here.
Now, I just sent a summary of local laws from surrounding municipalities about leaf blower bans.
Great.
All right, that'll be helpful.
All right.
I'm gonna say, guys. I'm gonna say I think you're crazy. I don't know.
Crazy. That's a little. Now, come on, Stargietti.
Not crazy, but you know, like.
All right, take it back. Come on.
Okay, but your job, Joe, is to make sure that we keep going with this, right? I understand your feelings.
There were never this kind of surveying done for every local. I mean, never.
Sure.
There's been a lot of changes of many things that have never been done in the past. That clearly a lot has changed over the year.
I am not suggesting we should do a survey about every step we take in the village. I don't think we should. But I do think that the pool survey was a really important piece, not only to understand how people felt, but also to gauge what it might cost.
I agree with you.
And in this case, hold on, you call this crazy. I have to defend myself.
I didn't mean it like that, you know.
We're talking about a subject that is affects a lot of people and a lot of businesses, and has engendered a lot of disagreement. So to the extent, my mantra, which can only partly be achieved, is I'd like to get to the end of a contentious discussion with folks on both sides of the issue, understanding how we got to what we did, which is different from liking it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything you just said, Mayor. I agree with
okay.
the full survey. I agree with getting to the end in a reasonable way and everybody understands it. I still say no.
All right.
Okay.
As we sat here, the new issue of the Pleasantville Post has landed in my mailbox. So. Thank you. Was that you, Marcy?
No, it was Noreen.
Was that you, Noreen? Good going.
Courtney just pushed it to it.
A timely moment. All right.
Yeah, so one comment about some of the emails that are coming out from the village and rec and everything. Any email where you have just a headline and it says click here for something, first of all, it looks a lot like to many people like spam or phishing, but it can also trip some of those detectors on some of the mail services. So you really need to put a little bit more content in them to not have it feel like that. I think we're from Parks and Rec in particular, we're getting a bunch of those recently, and you just don't want to feel that spammy.
Yeah, I've talked to Rec about it this morning.
Yeah, I only said that because the one that just got forwarded looked similar.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
All the news that fits, we printed. Anything else?
No executive session today, huh?
No.
Thank goodness.
No. All right. I have the disheartening report that my next mission is to go home and drag a bunch of things from one side of the basement to the other, because tomorrow they're jackhammering the floor for my sewer lateral.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Not what you need in the middle of COVID.
Thrilling way to spend money.
Mm.
Although you'd be surprised how thrilling it may feel when you don't have to worry about having a sewage backup. So as Noreen and Eric well know from their lives at Village Hall. All right, signing off.
All right. Nice to
Thank
see
you all.
Everyone, have a good
Night,
night.
everyone.
David,
Have a great night.
Paul, good night.
Night. Night.